It is said that Jesus fulfilled some people who, and I hate to say this way, but it really is true. Some people who are ignorant of this, of the overall biblical perspective, say that Jesus fulfilled every prophecy. The ones who know a little bit about Scripture says, well, he fulfilled some of them, and he's going to fulfill more when he comes back. My question is, did he actually fulfill any of them at all? And if so, to be fair, let's put it out there.
Yeah, so the question is, what are the Messianic prophecies? They're very unique. Messianic prophecies are called exhaustive and exclusive, which means that when they happen, it will be so self-evident that everyone will know it. There'll be no doubt of what is occurring. And that's, in fact, why all the nations, the Gentiles, they'll come to the Jews, 10 will grab the shirt of a Jew and say, take us with you, because now we know that God is with you. Isaiah chapter 11, verse 9, that the earth will be full of the knowledge of God as the water covers the sea. So that means what the Bible has in mind, and it's important for every person listening to the show. All Christians agree that these passages are entirely messianic. Jesus not only didn't fulfill these prophecies of that there would be an end to war, but there would be a worldwide peace, which we mentioned Zechariah. The first century, the Christian century, there was an enormous war where hundreds of thousands of Jews died in the war. It's war with Rome that continued beyond 70 to Masada in 73. The Qumran community was wiped out in 68. This is not a messianic prophecy, but the events that will unfold will be so compelling. Isaiah chapter 11, verse 6 through 8, the lamb will lie with the lion. Now, what we are told is that Jesus didn't, it's true, Jesus didn't bring about a worldwide knowledge of God, because, in fact, the knowledge of God didn't fill the world, and still to this day does not. The majority of citizens of the United Kingdom are atheists, so these prophecies weren't fulfilled. But it's somehow these prophecies, like born to a virgin was fulfilled, or born in the city of Bethlehem was fulfilled. Well, when we look up those what's called fulfillment citations, as it turns out, none of them are messianic prophecies. Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14 is describing a civil war that occurred 2,700 years ago in the days of Ahaz, the Davidic king, and his two enemies, Syria and the northern kingdom. Their kings, Pekah and Rizin, were wiped out. Micah 5:2 in a Christian Bible, 5:1 in a Jewish Bible, the verse was surgically cut in half in Matthew chapter 2, verse 6. So where it says, and his going forth is from ancient days, from early times. That's the connection between the Messiah and Bethlehem, meaning King David was born in Bethlehem, not the Messiah. Well, Matthew removes those words. So what we find when we begin to look up the passages that Jesus supposedly fulfilled, that we're told that he fulfilled, we're finding that the translation is incorrect. Psalm 22 doesn't say that they'll pierce his hands and his feet, or they pierced my hands and my feet. It really says, like a lion, they're at my hands and my feet. So what we find is, when we look at these passages, and for those who are Christians listening to the show, I don't mean to offend you, but when you're looking at your King James Bible, you're essentially looking at a theological crime scene where the texts were altered to make them appear Christological. This is not just a mistake. This is not Buddhism. This is not Hinduism, where they're just wrong about the monkey god. This was when the church changed texts, altered the Jewish scriptures, changed translations, wouldn't even permit Christians for over 1,000 years to own a Bible in the language that they could read. The first Christians that translated the Bible into English were executed for doing just that. They didn't even know how to translate the Hebrew. Tyndale was back translating from the Latin Vulgate. That's for the Jewish Bible. The Christian Bible, he could read fluently. But the texts were completely changed to make them appear Christological. and we kind of care about you. And as Jewish people, we want you to know that. But I know that you've been told by your pastor that we're blind. There's somehow some veil over our eyes. Well, as it turns out, it isn't. We're reading the text in its original language, and I want to do everything I can to help you, do that. So, in the Bible, in Isaiah 26:19, it does tell us about the resurrection of the dead, as we find in Daniel 12. There's no messianic prophecy. You want to hear something really interesting?
Absolutely.
This is really interesting. There's a theologian, very famous, a very bright fellow. His name is Wright, W.T. Wright. He's a bishop in the Anglican Church, and he's really a brilliant man. He's a lord in the House of Commons. You know what he does to prove that Jesus must have rose from the dead? Do you know? You know what his proof is? This is very interesting. This is a very sharp man. And he said the following. He says that no one expected the Messiah to die. No one. And in fact, if you look anywhere throughout all of the Tanakh, any literature prior to the Christian movement, anything Jewish prior to the first century, you will find anyone who ever wrote or suggested that the Messiah is supposed to die.
That's why Peter was so shocked whenever he said that.
So therefore, Wright says the following. This is a very sharp fellow. He said, then Jesus would listen to this thinking, because no one expected the Messiah to die, and let alone raise from the dead. So therefore, if people claim that Jesus died and rose from the dead, it has to be true, because no one would have ever made up something because it was so un-Jewish. I'm not making that up. You can read his works. You can watch him give this presentation on probably on YouTube, I would imagine. This is a very bright man. So he concedes that this was so not Jewish, therefore it had to be true, which is kind of something Paul says. It's so foolish, it has to be true. Well, that's exactly what we find. There is no passage like this, like any of these passages, no prophecy in the Jewish scriptures, and I will make the peoples pure of speech, so they will all invoke the Lord, my name, and serve him in one accord. Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 9. The opposite has occurred. And so there's no relationship between what the Messiah is supposed to do in the Jewish scriptures and what Jesus supposedly fulfilled. But as I've mentioned in the past, for most Christians, it's not about a passage in the Jewish Bible. What for most Christians, and with respect, something it took me a long time to figure out, most Christians love Jesus.
Sure.
And that's what it's about. And then the passages are there to evangelize, to reassure the Christians that what they're believing is in fact rooted in the Bible. But no Christian says, I believe in Jesus, or we'll call Messianic, whatever you want to call it. I believe in Jesus, or I believe in Yeshua because of Isaiah. No. People, if you listen to people who are in the church, who are in Messianic congregations, they're there because they love Jesus and they believe he died for their sins. It's not these verses. These verses, which we'll cover, and I'm looking forward to that, these verses only come in later to affirm to these folks that, hey, what you're believing is not nonsense. We've got Psalm 22, which says they pierced my hands and my feet. And when they have a King James or a New International Version Bible in front of them, they are stripped of the original, and they think it says that, when in fact the passage reads, like a lion there at my hands and my feet. That's what's really going on here.
Well, so in short, would you say, is it safe to say that there may have been parts of prophecies that he may have fulfilled, but then again, it points down to so many other Jewish people have also fulfilled what the Christians proclaim as being.
It's much worse than that.
Okay.
It's not only that Jesus didn't fulfill any of the Messianic prophecies. We want to talk about those Messianic prophecies that all Christians and Jews agree are Messianic. let me just go through them.
Okay,
The ingathering
please.
of the exiles, the return of the Jewish people to their land, the complete return, the worldwide knowledge of God, a worldwide peace on earth. God's kingdom is restored to earth. His reign fills the entire world. The rebuilding of the temple. Read the last two passages of Ezekiel chapter 37. In fact, from chapter 40 through 48 of Ezekiel describe the third temple. Now, here's the point. Listen carefully, my friends. It's not just that Jesus didn't fulfill them in the first century, the very opposite happened. That means there wasn't a worldwide peace that gripped the world in the first century, as promised in Isaiah 2 and 11. In fact, there was great war. And as a result of those wars, there wasn't resurrection death, but there was death. Hundreds of thousands of Jews died in the wars with Rome. That the final major war went from 66 all the way to 70. There was no temple built during the Christian century, but in fact, the temple was destroyed in the year 70. There was no ingathering of the exiles as described in Isaiah chapter 43, but in fact, as a result of these wars with Rome, the Jews were expelled from their land. So what I think what some people might miss here, it's not just that Jesus didn't fulfill the prophecy and it was neutral, it was like a blank, it didn't happen. No, God is saying something. The reverse occurred. This is not just it didn't happen and you might have missed it. It's exactly everything that occurred is in neon lights and the God of Israel is saying this is not the Messianic age. This is the antithesis, the reciprocal of the Messianic age. There was no period in human history where the very reverse of what the Messiah is supposed to accomplish occurred any more than that first Christian century. So it's not like he just didn't do anything and it was sort of neutral. No, the opposite happened. And therefore, no person who's reading the Bible would ever believe that Jesus could have, or anyone in the first century could have been the Messiah, because Messianic prophecies didn't happen. And the basis for Jewish belief in Mashiach is rooted in Scripture. We always just look at the Bible, and then from the Bible, we look out and say, okay, I want to see where the Bible's filled. What we don't do is say, okay, I'm going to cling to this person, say he's the Messiah, and then I'm going to scour the Bible or any rabbinic literature trying to find anything that might fulfill what I already believe, that might support what I already believe. Well, if someone really wants to know the truth about God, you're not going to approach the Bible in that way. What you're going to do is you're going to say, I'm surrendering to Scripture. I'm not going to come in with a preconceived notion of Jesus. I'm going to say, hey, let Scripture just talk to me, and wherever it takes me, I'll go.